Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I am Abid Jafri and my guest today has consistently held leadership positions in not only his professional life but in every part of his life. He has been a senior director at the Bank of America for nearly 20 years and is focusing a lot of his energy on employee inclusion and leadership growth. Among many of his roles, he is also the adult cricket chairman at Spencer Cricket Club, which is the biggest cricket club in the UK. He is who I would call a natural leader, and I am delighted to have Khawar Saleem here with me to discuss the changing nature of leadership in today's world. I hope you enjoy this episode. So, Khawar, I've always seen you as a natural leader. I've known you for quite a long time myself. You obviously hold very senior positions at Bank of America, and whenever I played cricket with you at Spencer Cricket Club, you've always been a captain or held a high senior position. And again, at the moment, you are the chairman of cricket at Spencer as well. So just on that, first of all, leadership. Are you born with it or can it be taught?
So, hi, Abid. It's great to be on this with yourself as well. That's an interesting question. I think a lot of people talk about whether those skills and abilities, whether you're born with them or whether you develop them over a period of time. I think it's a mixture of both. I think you need to have a certain amount of characteristics within your personality which move you towards the kind of the leadership sphere. But I think you need to tune that. I think you need to understand what you need to work on. You need to develop by experience, etc. And I think most people have those skills. And I think it's a question of just developing those and being in the right place at the right time. Definitely now, especially with the amount of diversity that we have as whether it's in global organizations, whether it's in sport, etc., you need different viewpoints. And therefore the leader is the strong, decisive, very overpowering person. I don't think that exists anymore. I think proper leaders now are from all types of characteristics and also all types of mentality. And you need that. You need that in an organization because you need variance of thought. But you also have that, because of the various kind of, whether it's sport, whether it's in the computer sector, whether it's in the finance industry, the way the organizations are operating now, you need different types of characteristics in your leaders in order to be successful. And I think that's it. That's a key thing. So everyone can be a leader. I think it's just understanding who you are. I think that's the key thing. If you can understand who you are and be true to yourself, your leadership capabilities will be wanted somewhere. You just need to know where that is and you need to get the opportunity, obviously.
And when people think about leadership, it seems to be that you need to have a team under you. But surely that's not necessarily the case. It's actually your own personal attributes and what you need to focus on yourself. You can lead by example. You don't need a team under you to lead. You can just show that naturally.
100%. So, often the best leaders are the ones who what we call matrix manage. So it's where you are able to influence and drive people who don't necessarily, aren't being performance managed by you, who you're not paying directly. In global organizations, you need other people to be on board for you to be successful. And that's a key attribute is how do you work in partnership with people? How do you get them to come along with you, with your journey, with your vision? How do you sell that to somebody who you don't have the ability to say, no, just do it because I told you to, and often I think within life, because, obviously you have friends and you have colleagues, etc., who you don't work with or you don't. So you find that in sport a lot as well. You don't necessarily need to be the captain. And for example, sports like cricket, especially where you need people who are leaders, not just the captain who's making the decision. You need leaders in your bowling unit. You need leaders in your batting unit. When you're out there, there's just two of you against everyone. So those skills are incredibly important from a matrix perspective as opposed to direct responsibility. And I think those are things where the traditional old style kind of leadership skills are not so relevant. Because, if you don't manage someone, telling them go and do it because I told you to doesn't necessarily work because they're like, well, why should I listen to you? Whereas if you can sell that vision to them, or you can get them to buy into what you're doing, then that is obviously incredibly important.
And do you think, obviously nowadays we are pretty much in a knowledge-based or information-based economy, that sort of the traditional sort of leadership style used to be really prevalent in economies which were more labor-led, possibly. Whereas now, because there's so much knowledge around and people understand and execute their skills much more clearly, they have much better understanding of what they're all about in terms of academics, education, their own personal skills. Do you think that there's been a shift, obviously, throughout your time in your leadership role? Have you seen that shift?
Yes. Access to information is incredibly important here, because if you think about, if you're in your office, you're with your boss in the old times, you didn't really know what else is going on. You did what you're told because you couldn't see the bigger picture, because you didn't have that information. Now we can all go online and we can find out what's happening across the board. We can also look at, what are the new ideas that are out there? What are the new ways of working? What are the new ways of driving things forward? And now I think also people are more liable to challenge and be more in a position where, because they feel like they're confident, they're able to get that knowledge and they're not dependent on you, they're more likely to say, well, hang on, there is another way of doing this. Or they'll challenge what you're doing and say, okay, I'm not sure this is the right way. And you have to be very, very kind of confident that the way that you're going about something is well thought through, and you have evidence to back it up. And I think freedom of information is incredibly important. So, we talk now about, I know some people see it as a bad word, but like influencers. But why do we have people like that? It's because they can freely disseminate knowledge across a wide variety of people in 2 seconds. They can get it out there, they can get it on YouTube, they can get it anyway. So you have that information flow. It means that people are more likely to say, okay, I can go elsewhere and find out the answer. I don't need to come to you.
Yeah. So as a leader, do you have to be in a position where you accept the fact that you will be challenged, and creating an environment where actually you can nurture that and have an environment where being challenged is a norm, rather than, I understand what you're saying about having thought through every decision you're making, but obviously naturally you'll make decisions which are not right as you're human. Everyone's human. So do you think it's creating an environment and hence a team which accepts that not only that they will be challenged, but they can challenge as well?
Yes, you have to have that. You have to have the ability and you got to have the confidence to be able to say to people, okay, come forward with alternative.
How do you learn that?
So you learn that by being through it and understanding that you're not always right. I think that's the key thing, is that especially as you become more and more senior and you cover a wider range, you can't know everything. You are dependent on other people to give you information or do something. Your success is based upon them being successful. And I think that realization comes along with experience of leadership, where you realize that, hang on, if I want to be successful, I need my team to be successful. And in order for them to be successful and me to be, we need to do it the right way. And so I need to take into account what they say. And often the most junior person can have the best idea, because with the experience that I just mentioned, it's a two-way thing, because you can have that experience, but that can mean that you're used to certain ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And you need innovation. You need, new ways of looking at things to come in and say to you, well, hang on, how about this way? And you need to think, okay, I can understand, but you also need to be confident enough to say, okay, I can take that on and not feel like it's a slight on my leadership that I'm taking advice. Because often, we see it in sport as well, where people will not take advice because they think if they do, it reduces their kind of, their leadership ability to lead the team, because, others are kind of muscling in. And I think that is part of that confidence thing as well. And you can be more successful. I mean, if you look, now, and I look at people like Owen Morgan, for example, quieter type of leader, you can see him consulting, etc. I think that consulting type of leadership is becoming more and more prevalent, and more people are successful with that.
Could you systemize that, or is it quite a fluid, natural thing?
So I think you do, because I think organizations will actively, have things like speak up, or the ability for employees to talk. And actively now, if you go to management training, etc., they will say that you need to go around the room. You need to hear the room. You need to hear what people are saying, and you need to listen. So one of the key things was years ago, you used to go into a team meeting and the leader would talk for 30 minutes or an hour, and it'd be like this. Now it's a lot more, let's open up the room, let's move the chair, somebody else speak up. And I think you actively do that as part of your day-to-day managing. And if you do that, it allows people, and then you've got to, obviously your reaction is important. If someone comes up with something, you don't just dismiss it, or you don't just ignore it, just do it for the sake of it. So you can 100% add it into your kind of routines and the way that you manage. And I think it's becoming more and more prevalent. And so it is something that I think is going to continue. Ultimately, though, the leader has to make a decision. And so you need to take the opinions on board, but you're responsible. We always have a saying that the bullet's got to go through someone to get to you. And that's someone is generally the person who's the leader. They're going to take the first hit. And so you've got to have the confidence and also listen to the room, understand, but ultimately you have to make a decision. And we all know in cricket, for example, do I take this bowler off or do I leave him on? Who do I swap him for? Everybody's got an opinion, but ultimately who's going to be judged is the person who actually has to make the decision. So, you have to listen, but you have to have the confidence and you've got to be decisive, because the other thing that you can have death by inertia where everybody has an opinion, you don't make any decisions. And so you need to make sure that at some point you go, okay, heard the room, taken everything on board. We now need to move forward. And I think that's sometimes see that kind of too much of, I don't want to say too much democracy, but I think at some point you have to say, okay, let's make a decision now. And this is the decision I made.
And just based on that, having too much democracy or lack of democracy, how would you, in your experience, deal with the different personalities that come out on the sports field or in business, in life? Because there are obviously people who are extremely extroverted and they'll really voice their opinion, and he who shouts the loudest is heard kind of thing. But how do you manage those people? And then how do you manage the people who are naturally reserved or quiet, but they would have really good ideas themselves, but you need to kind of pull it out of them? How would you do that?
Yeah. And that is how I think that's one of the key aspects of being a good leader. You need to essentially tailor your approach for the individuals. So if we're talking in a cricketing sense, I've captained a variety of characters, sometimes very strong, very loud characters, and people who are very experienced and have played at much higher levels than I have. They could have played test cricket, etc., have great views, happy to share them with you and come out. But often, the ones who are slightly more thoughtful, thinking about it, and won't come out initially because they're thinking through the problem, will have a great solution as well. And the way that you approach that is you look across the room and you go, okay, I know that, 5 out of the 10 people sat in this changing room will give me an opinion now. But I know that there's 5 others who are thinking it through. And in some cases, they will come and speak to me on a one-to-one basis, or I'm going to have to go and coax it out of them. And so you need to then tailor that approach. And it comes down to also how you behave with them as well. You need to tailor your approach to individuals because not everyone is the same. You need to think about what are they thinking? I need to be empathetic towards their behavior, what their situation is. And therefore you'll get more out of them. So I think it comes down to not one size fits all. So for example, sitting in a meeting room, that people will talk, some won't, some will keep quiet. You need to follow up. You need to say, okay, what did you think? And do it in an environment where they're comfortable. And then you need to coach them to encourage them to say, hey, listen, your opinion's valuable. It's valid. You need to speak up as well. And you need to try and do that, but be aware that it may be harder for some than for others, right? So you need to coach them, but you also need to, at the time, because you need to be successful now. You can't wait 6 months. You need to still get that knowledge and opinion from them as well.
Of course. So what are some of the biggest mistakes or the mistakes generally that you see a lot of people make over and over again, which you find frustrating? You see it, and then how do you kind of work with them to fix those mistakes? And then if they keep making those mistakes, what do you do?
Yeah, so it's a tough one because there's a difference between what we would call a professional environment and what I would call leisure and playing environment. In a leisure and playing environment, it becomes a lot harder because you're not essentially you're not in a workplace where you have to deliver. Often they're paying to play, so they want to be able to enjoy it and do something. So that's where it comes down to getting them to buy your vision. But then also it's about what are they there for? Why are they there? What are they getting out of this? So are they there because they only want to bat and they don't care about anything else? Fine. Okay. So then you have to explain to them that, okay, in order for you to bat, you need to do these other things as a minimum. They all come together. If they're there for another reason, they're just there for, the physical, they just want to run around and enjoy themselves. Then you need to say, okay, well, that is the switch that I need to find for this person. So in a leisure, it's a little bit harder because you need to know why they're there. In the workplace, it's slightly different because most people, I would say the majority of people are there because they're being paid. Yeah. At the end of the day, we all go to work to get paid. And so it comes down to, okay, you're here, you want to be paid, you want to be successful, you want to develop. Okay. So in order to do that, you need to build this skill set. You need to do these things and you need to be a bit more prescriptive around that. Okay, these are certain goals. These are certain things that you need to do. You need to be able to course correct over a period of months. And, there's various stages of that. And the big thing is they shouldn't get to a point where it's a surprise to them, where you say to them, this isn't working anymore. It should be a long process where you've kind of had those conversations and it's not a surprise because they know this is coming. And if it's a surprise to them, then you failed in your communication. So I think it's key in a professional environment to be very, very structured and approach it and be very open and honest. My belief is always to be very open and honest. Different management styles exist out there, but my view is that you're very open, honest up front, and you hope that the person reciprocates and is very open and honest with you. If they're not, then at some point you have to go, okay, this isn't how this relationship is working. It's not one of open trust. And then it becomes a bit more like where you have to document, activities and those things. In a playing environment, it's slightly different. It's more about a relationship that you have. And if that relationship breaks down, then obviously it becomes hard. Then you have to then say, right, okay, well, if it's a selection, then it becomes a selection issue. You have to then start thinking, okay, well, either they or myself, depending on what's important. Am I doing something wrong, or is it them that is out of kilt with everything else? So I think very different, but I think the approach is understand it from their point of view. Put yourself in their shoes, understand why they're there.
In a team environment, there are a lot of situations where, and I guess this could happen in a work environment as well in terms of promotions and everything, where there might be two players who have very similar stats, performing very similarly, but there's only place for one of them in a team. How do you deal with that sort of situation?
Yeah, so that is very hard to deal with because you are then literally saying to them, based upon my opinion. So you are being explicitly saying to them that it's not a personal thing, but it's based upon your value that you are seeing them at. And so the key here is to always be able to, and again, is be honest with them, but give them a route back. So why, give them something tangible to just say, I'm dropping you. I think you lost out because of this reason, specific. And you give them that ability to say, okay, if I do that, then I can get back. And then you have to follow up on that. If you say to them, hey, listen, you get 100 next week, you're back in, they get 100, you don't pick them, then that's not right. You need to be honest with your promises and deliver on them. And I think if you do that, you build up that. And I think one of the key things about leadership is that history of trust where it's not one event, it's not two events, it's multiple times you've delivered on what you said you would and they do. If you deliver and you are seen like that, then the first time you speak to someone, and especially in large organizations, your reputation goes before you. So if you say something, someone say, I'm going to do this. If you do this, they will go with you if you have that reputation. So I think a track record of openness and honesty is important. And I think you need to let people have their way, show them how to come back, how to get that position back. Don't just say to them, you're dropped. Yeah, it's not just, it's the stick and the carrot.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And what's your opinion on patience? Obviously, we live in a world of instant gratification, and you've touched on it, where you need to be patient with them. You need to sort of see performance over a period of time. But at the same time, obviously, there's only a finite amount you can do before you need to make changes. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, and I think it's 100% true because people will not always deliver, right? Sometimes people will fall out of line, and it could be for various reasons. And I think at some point you have to set yourself in your mind, okay, these are the 4 steps I'm going to go through. These are the things, this is the action plan. I think you need to, I'm structured in my leadership to say, okay, well, these are the 4 steps I'm going to go through. And if at the end of those 4 steps, I don't feel like it's progressed, then what is going to happen? You have to have, okay, what will be the end outcome of this? And you have to let them know as well. So you have to, that's part of it. They have to know the plan. And in work, you have formal things where you have, a plan with somebody where 6 months and you say, right, you need to deliver X, Y, and Z. And at the end of it, if they haven't, then it's very obvious. It's all very documented and you do it. You do it elsewhere, but doesn't have to be formal. It has to be in your head and their head. And then it's, as I said, it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
They know it's coming.
And there is a saying, you need to be impatient with actions, but patient with results. How difficult is it as a leader? Obviously, it's so results based in many walks of life for you to be patient with results where you've given them 6 months. You may not see that much progress over 3 or 4 months and you start worrying. Whereas if you just wait for the whole 6 months, you'll see the end result. How important is it to just stay patient and stay on top of things?
Yeah. And I think that's where the time and duration is important. How long do you have? If you're a football manager, for example, in the Premier League, and you need to win your next game, you need to pick your best 11 players, not the one who's going to be brilliant and play in 2 months' time. So I think it depends on when you need to come up with results. As a leader, it's part of the balance between results and nurturing and developing people as well, because ultimately you need to produce. And, whether it's in work, you have to hit certain targets. You then have to say, well, I need to do this. Or you need to be able to defend your team because it's the right thing to do. So if you don't hit a target, then it's like, well, this is the reason why. In the longer term, we're going to be better off as an organization because of this. In the sporting aspect, it's a lot harder because it's a lot shorter. But I think ultimately, you can have what I would call a latent. So within, let's say 100% of your team, you can probably have 10 or 20% where you can say, okay, I don't mind how they do because I'm developing them for the future. And so you can pick that one player or you can pick those 2 players where you're saying, okay, I'm going to bring them through and I'm going to stay with them and I'm going to stick with them over a period of time because I know they're going to pay me back double. And what I'm going to do is, unfortunately, the others are I'm going to have to make sure that they cover that and I'm going to have to manage that. And, I had a little bit of that when I was captain at Spencer, where I was thinking about a couple of youngsters and bringing them through and knowing that they would not be, we're playing Premier Division cricket, which you quickly get exposed if you're not up to scratch. And so it was fitting them at the right points, bowling them at the right points or batting them at the right points to give them that experience and knowing that, they'll pay back, over long term for the club, and you'll keep them as well because there's the retention aspect as they saw the path for themselves. And you have to say, okay, that's again, it's the decision. Have I picked the right people to do that?
And is it, you see a lot of youngsters being thrown in. I understand what you're saying in terms of obviously developing them, but you see a lot of youngsters being thrown in at the deep end based purely on potential rather than actual stats to back up their potential. So let's say they show in, during training, this might even relate to work life as well, but they show in training that they look really good. They do all the basics really well. So just based on that, they are thrown in at the first level, let's say. But in actual effect, it's better for them to go through the ranks, third team, second team, first team, to really develop their game. Do you see a lot of that or not?
So yes, and I think there's some aspects to this as well. If you're a batsman, I think weight of runs is incredibly important. So, we've all seen batsmen who hit an amazing shot and you think, oh my God, that guy's, a brilliant player. But when you look in the stats, it's like 6 and out every week. And it's like, okay, well, they look good, but they're not producing. And so I think for a batsman, I think weight of runs is very important, that mentality. So the mentality for a batter, for example, is, okay, you need to win the game. How do I win? Do they win the game for you? You know, you need 120. Would you send them in? Would they knock off the runs? Can they bat long time? Can they, adapt to the situation? Do they think about what they're doing? I think the mental aspect of batting is incredibly important. So I think you look at that, because a 20 batting at 7 to win the game is, worth more than 100, which was, batting 50 overs and basically losing you the game because they've just blocked for ages. So,
yeah.
So you need to think about, okay, that mental development as a batter. So you're thinking, okay, I need to look at that. Do they have that capacity? Are they learning? As well as looking at whether they have the ability to play at the higher level. And it's a great point you make around promoting too early, because I think it's often because there's pressure nowadays. Like, everybody wants everything now, as we talked about earlier. So often younger players won't stay. And if they're scoring lots of runs, they're like, well, why aren't I getting pushed forward? And sometimes it's better for them to spend that season. Problem is nowadays is that you often can lose them. And then the question is, well, do you want to take that risk or don't you? So I do think it happens. I think it happens. And I think you can get, people who flatter to deceive. And again, that's part of the thinking through what are the key things you're looking for in someone. A spin bowler, for example, we know if someone bowls spin, the more overs that a spinner bowls, the better they become. The more developed, the more mature spinners kind of get better and better with age. If you're a quick bowler and you bowl 100 mile an hour, brilliant. Get them in, give them the new ball, let them knock someone's head off. So it's a different approach probably, where you want to go, okay, they're quick, we can, utilize them and then we can take them off. They're there to blast people out. Not necessarily as much as like, okay, they need to develop technically, etc. They've got that speed, that raw speed that you need. Spinners, sometimes you say they can spin the ball loads, but they can often bowl a lot of bad balls as well and go for runs. So it's thinking about what are they doing? So looking at them and saying, okay, what role do they play in my team? What attributes do I need? Do I give them a go? You can hide. So sometimes you can hide a spinner sometimes in your team. They can bowl some overs at the right time when it's, they've lost a few wickets. You can bring them on so you can develop them that way. If you're an opening bowler, you're an opening bowler. You're going to be bowling against the best batsman at the beginning. So you're exposed. If you're a batter and you're an opener, you're going to have to open, right?
Yeah.
And then that's the new ball. So I think it definitely occurs because there's a push upwards, but I think it varies depending on what role you want them to play. Are they the maverick? Then fine, chuck them in, let them have a go. If they're not, if they're the backbone of your team, then they've got to have something substantial.
I've also always wanted to ask someone like you, are we getting to a stage in terms of recruitment now where practical experience is sort of far outweighing the academic qualifications of a person, or not even practical experience, but that coupled with the importance of vocational qualifications more than over a generic bachelor's degree? Do you see that in your line of work as well?
Yes, 100. So I have an apprentice who has joined my team as well. I think it's amazing. I think it's fantastic. I think if you think about it though, it's something around the information. So recruiting years ago, you went and got graduates. It was, it was almost like, okay, I know that they've got a certain level, that they've been XY university, they've done X degrees. Okay, I know that their baseline is safe to a certain extent. I know that they have a certain amount of capability because they've come the traditional route. So it's easy to then go, right, okay, I know what they are. I know what level they'll be when they come in. I have a tried and tested way of getting them through my organization. What's happening now, and one of the reasons is the cost of higher education, is that, and I think there's a lot of people who kind of broke the mold and incredibly what I would call potential and intelligent, who didn't want to go to university and said, right, no, I'm going to start working. And because they've driven through their organizations and done a really good job, it's no longer that you have to have gone to X university and done Y to get a role. Now it's a lot more open. And I think the other thing is that baseline that I talked about, it's much easier to find out what people have done and what their history is because of the information that's available now.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of looking forward, how do you see the leadership role developing? So from an academic point of view, what should people be looking for? Is getting a degree, further education essential, or is that becoming much more of a niche sort of thing where if you're in the medical field, you need something? Whereas if it's a generic sort of business field, you may not need a degree. Far more important would be experience, like you've said. That seems to be the way it's going. What sort of lessons have you learned, and what would you say going forward in regards to leadership and how that develops?
Yeah, so I think, some of the key things is you need to look at people individually. So it's the same thing around whether they're a graduate, whether they're just fresh out of school. You need to look at people and actually think individually. And I think that's important. It's become more and more important that their individual skills, you value not the kind of the standard. The standard is still important, absolutely. But outside of the standard is also now becoming important to have those varied viewpoints, varied backgrounds, varied approaches. The most successful organizations in the world are able to adapt. We found out from COVID, organizations that were agile, were able to think quickly on their feet, have done well because they've been able to adapt the workforce at home, things like that. The ability for them to shift quickly. You need people who have done that. If people are very I kind of plod along in a straight line all the time, it's harder in the fast pace that the world moves at now, and the way things are now. The impact of something in one area is global. So I think from a leadership perspective, it's kind of taking yourself away from what I would call the standard leadership forms and thinking about, workforce of the future, for example. What we see today will not be what people want tomorrow. People have shifted away from, example, working in the office. People now want the ability to work from home. They want to have that ability to spend, that time where they would be commuting, but also have the ability to be flexible with their families and do X, Y, and Z. How are we developing it? That is where, from a leadership perspective, you have to step back and go, where's my organization going? Where's the world moving to? And I need to be adaptable. Despite I might have done it this way for 20, 30 years, I need to think on my feet, and I need to switch gear when needed to get the best people. If I want the best people and I want to get the best out of the people that are in my organization or in my team, etc., I need to be able to be agile, quick, sell them on what they believe is important as well. It's not just about what you need. It's about also what they need. I think in this world now as well, everybody feels they need to have a personal skin in the game. They can't just follow you blindly. I think people are a lot more aware now. So I think from that perspective, that's how we have to develop forward, is we have to be a lot more understanding, empathetic, and also understand the diversity that we have and realize that there's not just one single way. And I think, previously there was often it's my way or the highway. I think that's no longer valid. I think that's, obsolete now. And I think you have to be flexible, and I think but confident and decisive, and have that communication as well. I think those are key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're heading into an era where the focus for leaders, the really good leaders, would be working for their employees or subordinates, having that sort of a mindset rather than the other way around. And I think that's where you'll see the top leaders coming through would have that sort of a mindset. You get a feeling that might be it. And, just making sure that empathy and patience seem to be the key words at the moment where leadership really strives or thrives going forward. But yeah, thank you so much for doing this with me. It's been a real pleasure. Some serious golden nuggets in there, and look forward to doing it again soon.
No, thank you, Abid. It's been a pleasure chatting to you on this, and hopefully the listeners have got something out of this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.